Hey, Google. Can you guys hear me? We're on. Rock and roll. Hi, guys. Welcome. Awesome. So as you can see, we're here to talk about human connection in the digital age. Thank you guys for taking the time to be here. So I want to start by thanking you all, because being at Google, I know that you could be getting a massage for free, lunch for free, haircut for free, a lot of other things, but you're here with me, and that makes me happy. And so what I want to promise you before we dig in today is that we're not just going to talk about human connection. We're actually going to talk about how to connect in the digital age. And so my goal is that you guys walk out of here with tangible techniques that you can use to connect with the people you want and the people that you want to know. How's that sound? Yeah. Rock and roll. So you guys, before we dig in, this talk is going to be broken up into 3 specific sections. So stories about how I was able to take this deep yearning for connection, this curiosity about relationships, turn it into this business that has helped 100,000 people to give what we think is the most meaningful gift in the world. We're going to talk about stats, how do strong social ties and relationships affect our brains and affect our bodies. And we're going to talk about tangible takeaways, so how we can actually communicate to connect. So there's those 3 components. And before we start, it's always nice to actually establish what is human connection. And my favorite definition is this one by Brené Brown. I define connection as energy that exists between people when they feel seen and heard and valued, and when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive strength and sustenance from the relationship. A beautiful articulation of that energy that exists between 2 people when we feel connected. And at Tribute, we've actually broken that down even further. So we've created a construct that can allow people to evaluate the depth of their relationships, that which they have an abundance of, that which they're really seeking. And we call that AVS. So AVS is a mutual feeling of A, appreciation, mutual recognition of the other person. Do you see that person? Do you appreciate who they are? Needs to exist for human connection. Second, vulnerability. Can I be honest with this person? Can I be truthful with this person? Can I be fully myself with this person? Vulnerability is the bridge to connection. Next is support. And support's a beautiful thing, and the way you think about it in human connection is a natural call to support and be supported. And so these are the 3 components that we can break down when human connection truly exists. An easy way to evaluate your friendships as well as those new relationships that you're adding depth to. That's our definition of human connection. So we all know that human connection is important to experience, to have fun, to magnify joy. But I also want to introduce you to why we should really care about our social ties, our relationships. And to do that, I'm going to introduce you to a guy named Dr. Robert Waldinger. So Dr. Waldinger did the longest study on happiness in our history. It was a 75-year longitudinal study of 750 people. When they released this research, he gave this famous TED Talk. And also, as I was perusing through the results of that research, there was one statement that they literally highlighted and bolded to emphasize its importance. And that statement was this: the clearest message we got from this study is that good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. Good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. So from this research, we can assume that strong social ties, investing in our relationships, is probably the smartest investment we can make in our overall happiness. But it goes beyond just happiness. What about our health? What about our brains? What about our bodies? So recent research also shows people who have strong social ties, the medical term to connotate relationships, have longer lives, stronger immune systems, literally higher levels of white blood cells to fight off disease, lower levels of stress and anxiety, and they're less likely to dive into bad habits like smoking or drinking. An alarming study I recently ran into said this: having weak social ties is as harmful to ongoing health as being an alcoholic, and twice as harmful as obesity. So again, when we have weak social ties, it's not just a detriment to our happiness, it's a detriment to our health and our mental well-being. So it's something that we need to care about. And so now I want to tell you guys a little bit about how I got into this line of work, how I was able to study human connection, start businesses that are bolstering relationship and gratitude in the world. And it started when I was 10 years old. The first job I can remember is selling these books in the back of a room for my mom. My mom's an 8-time published author. She talks about communication, networking, articulating the value of your ideas. So this thread of communicating to connect was something that was ingrained in me at a very young age. And so one of the common threads through my childhood was sports. It was how I connected, playing basketball, football, and lacrosse. Right before I graduated, I was enlightened to the power of adaptive athletics, helping young people with disabilities to unite with their peers through sports. And that inspired me to start Dreams for Kids DC, a community that brought kids together to play all these incredible things you see up here: water skiing, outdoor adventures, hockey, lacrosse, using sport as a facilitator of human connection. Then I got really interested in tech, and I started to look at bigger problems affecting the people with disabilities in their community. And so we built Ability List, an online platform that allows people with disabilities to share the resources they know about and that they need. So again, building community with an online platform. So this passion for connection, this curiosity about communication, took a step up to the next level when I was 27 years old. And it all started with a gift. So my fiance Mickey is in the back of the room right now. And on my 27th birthday, she took me out to dinner in Brooklyn where we live. We come back to our apartment, and I always remember that I swing the door open thinking that we're going to have a low-key night. And then there's a silence. And then 3, 2, 1. All these people jump out. She had planned this incredible surprise party, so I'm hanging out with all of our favorite people in the apartment. Halfway through the party, Mickey jumps up on a chair, and she yells, "Everyone in the living room!" So everyone runs into the living room. She sits me right in the back, and she had rented this projection screen. So she puts it up on the wall. I have no idea what's going on, and I would soon find out. So Mickey had taken the time to reach out to 25 of my closest friends and all my family members. She asked each one of them to submit a 1-minute video telling me why they love me. Even telling you this, I get goosebumps over my entire body. So as I sat there in the back of the room, these videos started to stream. My best friend in New York calling me his best friend for the first time ever. My brother telling me how grateful he is that we're finally friends again. My mom telling me how proud of me she is. And that was about the moment that what Alan Watts would call tears of wonder joy started to flow. Not even a cute little cry, but like a big, ugly, like massive drops coming down, one of those cries. And I did that for the next 20 minutes straight. So I remember when it stopped, the first thought I had in my head was, wow, I just watched my eulogy at 27, which is a much better time to watch a eulogy, in my opinion. So I needed a break, and I walked over to the next room, and I just looked at Mickey, and I said, that was the best gift I've ever received. And I said, how'd you do it? And she just looks back at me, and she says, well, it was terrible. And so she says again, it was hundreds of emails to remind people to submit their videos, collecting files through Dropbox, Drive, text message, and last but not least, editing everything together in iMovie. So it took her about 15 hours, and it was then and there I had this innate understanding of the power of this gift, and I realized the only reason more people didn't get it was because of how difficult it was to create. So then and there, Tribute was born. And so Tribute is our website that automates the process of building one of these gratitude-filled video montages. It automates the process of inviting your friends, of collecting videos. And we built the first web-based collaborative video editor to easily put these things together. And it started as a simple mission to share that joy, those tears of wonder joy that I felt in the back of the room with the world. And the last 2 years have been really fun. So over 50,000 tributes in 40 countries around the world. Yep, that's Regis checking us out on the Today Show. That was appearance number 2, which was very fun. But most importantly, what we're most excited about is that we feel that we're deeply ingrained in this digital intimacy movement. Is that we are on a mission to leverage the power of video to spread gratitude and human connection in the world. Is how can we build technology that adds significant value to our users' offline relationships? And we think that this is not only something that we are personally passionate about, but something that is incredibly relevant right now. Because as a society, we are more connected than we have ever been. and we are quantifiably lonelier than we have ever been at the same time. In 1980, AARP ran a study of their entire membership, the Association for Retired Persons. In 1980, the number of people who identified as lonely was 20%. That's a lot. They did that same study in 2010, and the number had doubled to 40%. 40% of their entire membership identifying as lonely at the same time when they were identifying more connections and more acquaintances than they were in 1980. So next, an even more alarming study talking about in 1985, the American Sociological Review did a study. And what they found was that in 1985, the average person had 3 confidants, 3 people that they could confide in, that they considered close friends. When they redid that study in 2004, that number dropped from 3 to 1 close confidant, to 1 close friend. And to put it in even more perspective, of the people that they surveyed, 25% said that they didn't have 1 person that they could confide in. 25% are saying that they essentially don't have 1 person they consider a close friend. And that matters. We just talked about what what relationships do for our happiness, what it does for our health. When people don't feel they belong, they'll do crazy things to fit in. So this is a human connection crisis. This is something that matters, something that deserves to be looked into. So what's the role of technology? Here at Google, as a tech entrepreneur, as a designer, how can we think about tech's role in this? And when we first started seeing social media explode onto the scene, there were a lot of surveys that correlated loneliness and depression with increased exposure to social media networks. More research coming out today actually has conflicting reports, whether it's actually lonely people, depressed people who spend more time on social media and on the internet. And so I want to move beyond that. And I want to focus on one thing that the research does back up, and that is that we get out of the internet, we get out of social media what we put into it. And the clearest example I can lay for you guys is that if you're on Facebook, if you're browsing your friends' profiles passively, if you're taking what we call the one-click actions attribute, if you're just liking a photo, if you're sending 1 on your friend's birthday to trigger that birthday message that both of you know took no thought, no effort, you are not adding to your social capital. You're going to leave that experience feeling more isolated. But if you're going onto these platforms, if you are composing messages, if you are being thoughtful, sending authentic birthday messages, sharing the articles that you're discovering, then you are going to leave those experiences more connected. So at Tribute, what we think about in our design ethos is what are the human values of the people that are using Tribute, as opposed to the traditional KPIs of a tech product, of virality, of interactions, of growth, of revenue. How do we quantify the values of our users? And that's why we have metrics like TOJ, which literally tracks the number of recipients who cried tears of joy. And guess what that number is today? 80%. 80% of those 50,000 reported the recipient crying tears of joy, quantifying the number of people who said, "I love you" in their videos, quantifying the percentage of people who feel more connected after giving their tribute. So we move from things like more interaction to what is a meaningful interaction quantified by our users. Looking at ease and focusing more on thoughtfulness. What is a thoughtful interaction for our user? And looking at more connections, the number of invitees, the number of friends, and actually understanding what does a deep relationship look like and how can we move towards those relationships. And so, if we understand that we need to help people make these thoughtful decisions for themselves, that's the role of technology. That's what we can do to help people as technologists, as designers, as entrepreneurs. And so at Tribute, we really believe in the power of communication. The power of communication to help us connect. And like I promised in the beginning of the talk, I really do want to help you guys walk away from today with tangible techniques, things that you can use in everyday interactions with friends, family, networking events, everything you've got. So the first thing we want to talk about is sharing gratitude. Sharing gratitude may seem like a simple thing in theory, but as we talked about when we defined connection, appreciation is that first cornerstone of meaningful connection. And appreciation is powerful for a few reasons. Number one, it allows the recipient to see those qualities in themselves that they sometimes may deny. Second, it reinforces those feelings of appreciation and gratitude that we have for that other person. So it's literally like a mini gratitude meditation when you actually say and articulate your gratitude out loud. And third, and most beautifully, is when we share a compliment with someone. And recent research backs this up. They're not only more likely to reciprocate with us, but they're more likely to give someone a compliment in your local community. So it creates this beautiful chain reaction of gratitude every time we tell someone why we appreciate them. And so now I want to introduce you to a few of our favorite sharing gratitude techniques. And so the first is not I love you. The first is I love you because. And one thing that we should understand is that it is not our articulation or sentiment of affection that impacts the recipient. So when I walk out the door, it's not I love you, Mickey, that truly impacts her. It's I love you, Mickey, because you inspire me and you support me as much as anyone I know. It's not saying thank you to your coworker. It's saying thank you. I was going through a really tough week, and this really helped me out. It's when we go beyond that simple sentiment of affection that the recipient truly feels the meaning, the intention of what we want to express. It's that simple transition of I love you to I love you because. Use that one word and watch how it transforms the way that you communicate. The next is the idea of the power of the prompt that I was just talking about with Florian in the front row. And it's the idea that sharing our gratitude can sometimes bring on a little bit of anxiety. We don't want to tell someone how they've impacted our lives or that we love them because we don't know what they'll say back to us. We don't know if they'll reciprocate. We don't know if we'll make them uncomfortable. And when we don't know those things, oftentimes we don't push our boundaries, we just don't do it. And so oftentimes, we need these prompts. We need to help people by giving them a question that helps them to articulate their appreciation for someone. So the way that we do this on Tribute is every campaign we do is based around prompt questions. So it's not, what do you love about Katya? Or sorry, it's not, send Katya a birthday message. It is, what do you love about Katya? It is, what's your favorite memory with Katya? How has Katya impacted your life? So prompt questions allow you to unify the conversation for an individual. It automatically plants an emotional sentiment in someone's brain. So if you ask someone a question, now they already have this feeling, as opposed to giving someone an open slate and saying, film a birthday video, tell them you're grateful for them. It's really when you provide that context for creativity that people are more comfortable and compelled sharing. So the challenge here would be the next time that you're at a birthday dinner, or the next time someone is taking off, or just they should land at a huge project, be what we call a conversation catalyst. Be the person who stops the dinner and says, hey, we're all here for Heather. Let's go around the table and everyone tell her what's your favorite thing about Heather. Be a conversation catalyst and watch how that unites your group, your community, and how impactful that will be on the person that you focus on. Does that make sense? Awesome. So the next one is another simple one. And it's the idea of being nice first. Is that so often we wait for permission to share that kindness that we feel, the gratitude we feel, the thanks that we feel. And the way that I want to kind of ground this in your memory banks is to think about that saying that we all heard 1,000 times growing up. So you'd tease a kid on the playground, your mom would see you, she'd come over to you and she'd say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. So watch this. If you look at those two don'ts and you get rid of them, you know what it becomes? If you don't, or if you have anything nice to say it all. It's this simple idea that whenever we have a kind feeling, a compliment, we feel thankful for someone, there is no good reason to ever keep that inside of your head. Just think about any time you've ever received a compliment and said, gross. Never happened. So if you have anything nice to say it all. So next, I want to move into our second part of the communication techniques, and that's something that we call the art of meaningful conversation. Before we move into this, does anyone have any questions about that first element of sharing gratitude, articulating our gratitude and appreciation? We'll open up for questions at the end as well. So the art of meaningful conversation is grounded in the idea that human connection starts with communication. So the art of meaningful conversation is about overcoming anxiety. It's about adding value in conversation. It's about listening attentively. It's about connecting and feeling confident in any social interaction. And we can think about it broken up this way. FAM. Finding your authentic voice, asking better questions, and the metamorphic two-step to translate presence. So before we get into that, I want to address something that is the biggest deterrent and barrier to human connection, in my opinion, and that is social anxiety and shyness. And so again, I want to define social anxiety in clear terms. Social anxiety can be defined as the fear of negative judgment. So social anxiety is the fear of negative judgment. And another thing that I want to establish is that recent research shows that about 60% of all people say that they are dealing with some issues of social anxiety or shyness. It is not rare. And when we were dealing with social anxiety or shyness, we have an aversion to social interaction. It's going to keep us from dating the people we want to date, from meeting the friends we want to be friends with, from getting the job that we deserve. And so again, if social anxiety is simply the fear of being negatively judged, some people leap to the assumption that we should just stop caring what people think. But that is not the path to connection. That is an easy path to narcissism and sometimes the White House. So we can start by finding our authentic voice. And the authentic voice is this deep understanding of who we are, what we care about, and what we want. And the reason that this is so important is that if we don't know who we are, what we stand for, we will constantly revert to seeking validation from others. Is that we will need other people to tell us what is acceptable, what is cool, as opposed to being driven by our own intuition, morals, values. And there's a simple test that you can use in any situation, whether you're in a meeting at Google, whether you're in a party, whether you're at Thanksgiving dinner with your family. And that simple test is this one question. Am I doing this because I want to be, or because I think people will like it, or think it looks cool? And the clearest example I can give you of this, and we've all been there, don't even lie that you haven't, is you're at a party, your friends haven't showed up, and then you pull out your phone and you're just looking at it, doing absolutely nothing. Like everyone just smiled. So we've been there. You don't want to just do nothing on your phone. You're doing that because you're worried about the perception of other people thinking you're weird or whatever it might be. And the easiest construct that you can think about in these moments is, am I being driven by internal motivation or external motivation? Internal versus external. Why am I doing what I'm doing right now? Always ask yourself and remind yourself to revert back to that internal motivation. And we can all start. Here's another challenge. How to find your authentic voice starts by articulating your answers to these questions. And to many of them, I hope that you do. You have a feeling, an understanding of these. But when you actually take the time to answer them, to put the words that these questions deserve, you'll go into social interactions with more power, a higher understanding of yourself, and it will translate to greater presence and greater connection. And one of the beautiful things I think about when I look at questions like this is that the answers will always change. And that's okay. That's a beautiful part of life. The questions will remain the same. But just the mere fact that these answers will change is not an excuse for not having an answer. So meaningful conversation starts with us in establishing that understanding of self. So the second is to ask better questions. And one thing that we can establish when we think about asking better questions as a path to human connection are these two things. Is that when we are asking questions and listening attentively, we will always leave a good impression on our counterpart. And beyond that, we will always make them feel valued. So if we are asking questions and listening, you are always going to leave a positive impression on the person that you're speaking with. On top of that, questions are the most effective path for learning and growth. If we are learning, if we are growing, there is always fulfillment to be had there. And as our pal Gandhi said, When you talk, you are merely repeating what you know. When you listen, you may learn something new. And again, I love these constructs that allow you to evaluate how you're being in any given moment. And another question that you can think about, whenever you go into a meeting, before you go to your next conference, ask yourself this one question. What am I most excited to learn about this person? It's actually taking 60 seconds before you hop on that call and just identifying, what am I most curious about? When you establish a foundation of curiosity to take into any social interaction, you now have a virtuous path through that entire interaction. Because of those two things we established before, articulating our curiosity will lead us into virtuous connection in every interaction. We can trust that. Here's another one of those constructs, the idea of being interested over interesting. And it actually should be an equal sign there. It should say that if you are interested, you are interesting, and you will be received well by other people. And again, this incredible quote by Einstein, I have no special talent, I'm only passionately curious. And the idea of going through life to understand people, to understand the world, in my opinion, is just one of the best ways to experience life, and something we can all aspire towards. And you can also help yourself by giving a foundation of questions that I call your go-tos. Is that give yourself a leg up. I've been talking about human connection and relationships for so many years, but at the end of the day, I revert back to the same questions. Because there is a through line, there is a theme to what I want to understand about the people I meet. So if you think about these questions, you can trust yourself to fall back to these more virtuous paths of communication and conversation in any given moment. So think about what yours are. Here's a few that I've always loved. What are you most excited about? What's most challenging right now? Because when we talk about challenge and struggle, we open up an opportunity to support and to be supported. What's your focus at the moment? What's important right now? What's the dream? Identifying what people really want to do. And do you guys want to talk about your dreams or your day job? Well, you guys work at Google, so it's probably very cool. But at the same time, talking about our dreams, what we really want, is where we can find that energy, that passion, the stuff that we really want to connect on. What do you care about? That simple question to get to what is important to people, which is an incredible thing to understand and get to know someone. So the next is probably the simplest step of all these things that we're going to talk about in the art of meaningful conversation. And so the reason that we need this is because presence is tantamount if we want to connect with people. If we have a negative internal dialogue, if we're thinking about other things, if I'm not right here to talk to you and to look you in the eyes, I'm not fully capable of articulating myself. I can't listen to you fully. And so presence is important. And another thing to identify is that our brain's priority is not to connect. Our brain's priority is to keep us safe. And our brain is really good at telling us all the things that are going to go wrong. Our brain is really good at taking us into the meeting and telling us why this person's not going to invest in us, about why this person's not going to like us. They're not going to think I'm smart. They're not going to think I'm pretty, whatever it might be. And so we need to remind our brain what feeling good looks like. We need to remind our brain what we want to happen. And so it's, again, this simple two-step process that I learned from a hypnotherapist in New York City. Remember, I walked into a party, I met this guy, and I said, so what do you do? And he's like, well, I'm a hypnotherapist. And I stopped him and I said, I'm going to corner you and ask you 100 questions. Are you okay with that? And he was like, yes. And so the first thing I asked is, so what's the number one thing that people try to get rid of? And what do you guys think it is? Smoking is the one everyone says. That's what I said too. But it is not smoking. He said self-doubt. Self-doubt is the number one thing that hypnotherapists are asked to cure. And so then I went down this line of questioning. I said, so if you want to cure someone of self-doubt, what do you do? And he said that the first step is articulating the undesired state. So putting words to this negative feeling, because then it has less control over us. So it's, again, before you go into that meeting, it's actually saying, what's going to go wrong? How do I not want to feel? Those things that we just talked about. They're not going to think I'm smart. They're not going to think I'm experienced enough. We're not going to connect. That's the undesired state of being. And so this one little question in step 2 can change everything and will take you 15 seconds before you go into any meaningful interaction. How do I want to feel? How do I want to feel? So before I step foot in this room today, I asked myself, how do I want to feel? And I said, I want to be passionate. I want to be myself. I want to feel loose. So happy, passionate, loose. HPL. Now I have 3 things. And whenever I have any sort of doubt or anything that takes me out of the moment, I have these 3 desired states of being that I can tap into right now. I am here as Andrew, the way that I want to be. I promise you that if you just ground yourself in the metamorphic 2-step before any important meeting, it will transform your ability to connect in that conversation. Does that make sense? How do I want to feel? Awesome. So we're about to close, and before we do that, I want to invite you guys into a quick 60-second gratitude meditation. So if you guys will, just sit back in your chairs, literally 60 seconds. And you can close your eyes, you can open your eyes, whatever you're most comfortable with. So what I'd like you to do is close your eyes, if you'd like to. And on the count of 3, we're going to take one big breath in. 1, 2, 3. And now with your eyes closed, just feel the sensation of your breath as it goes in, as it goes out. And now I'd like you to think about one person that you're grateful for. Who is one person that's had an impact on your life? Whether it's a mom, a dad, a best friend, a significant other. And just imagine that person sitting right in front of you. They're just looking right back at you. And now, I want you guys to remember I love you because. And I want you to articulate why you're grateful for them. Why do you love them? And sit with that for a moment. And on the count of 3, we're going to open our eyes. 3, 2, 1. I want you to take a look at what's on the screen right now. If you have anything nice to say it all. There is no reason to keep that kindness, that gratitude that you feel for that person who's impacted your life in your head. That life is an incredible gift, and to experience it with the people we love is an even greater gift. So my last challenge and invitation to you guys today as we close out is if you'd like to, at some point today, or right after this talk, is text that gratitude to this person. See how it makes you feel. See how it makes them feel. And hopefully you take this into your life moving forward. Thank you so much, guys. Oh, and we actually have one final thing. So this is John, Tribute's community manager in the back. And so in the vein of Google and free stuff, we're going to give you guys a gift card to create your first Tribute on the house. So there's probably about 70 of you guys that are here. So we want to make sure that you guys get to do this, whether it's for a birthday, a wedding, a bar mitzvah, anything special coming up. And for those of you that are online watching this, if you tweet out "We Tribute" and this talk, we'll also reach out to you with a free $19 gift card to create your first DIY Tribute. Awesome. And if there's any questions, I think I'll look at Katya to see how we do that. But I'd love to field any questions about kind of our research in the field or how we got Tribute started, whatever's on your mind.
So here, there's a microphone right here.
Hi.
Great talk.
Thank you.
I love that. So before I came to Google, I was a school counselor at a high school in the Bronx, working with teenage girls. And a lot of what you said kind of makes me a little nervous for the younger generations, just because the style of communication now is all they know. And I think for a lot of us in this room kind of got the best of both worlds, so we have the ability to tap into a lot of what you said. So I'm just curious if you've thought at all about how to reach a younger audience or how to kind of tackle those things, because I found it really hard for the girls to, A, be vulnerable, and that whole like self-doubt thing, they had no confidence in themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just curious, like your, I don't know, ideas on targeting a younger audience.
So Tribute's target demographics and where we focus on is on the 18 and above. So where people kind of have a little more emotional intelligence and are capable of articulating these things. So it's not where I've spent most of my time at Tribute, but it was where I spent a great deal of my time with Dreams for Kids. And I think that what we always lead with when it comes to kids again, are some of these values that we talked about of leading with kindness before we get to the communication aspect, is establishing that as the foundation of interaction between people, of just being able to ask yourself, is this a kind thing? And so, I mean, when we were at Dreams for Kids, we had this thing that we embraced at any one of our events, because we were dealing with a lot of kids with disabilities, is if you're ever unsure, the general consensus was that you just go over and you ask, and everyone just seeks to understand. And it was basically setting this baseline of understanding between people rather than making judgments and all these other things. So I think, again, I don't do a lot of work directly with kids, but I think that establishing that understanding of seeking to understand your counterpart and asking questions will still be a virtuous path, right? I mean, when you think about your time as a counselor, what were the biggest challenges that young girls were finding with being vulnerable? Just that they were being attacked, or they weren't receiving that back to them, or? Yeah,
a little bit of everything. I think part of it was too, like, they couldn't find an authentic voice because everything was done for like a like on Instagram or for a retweet or whatever it was. And they would give each other compliments like on Instagram just to get it back so that they could look at it and say, I have 500 comments of how great I look, So
I'm so happy you said that, because it really did just trigger something in me. And my reality is that I wasn't a great student throughout high school and even college. It's kind of like I went through and I got grades, but I was never fully present there or valued it. And no kind of guidance, no speakers, no counselors ever connected with me and gave me insight or advice about how to evaluate the world or how I wanted to live my life that really connected. And so when we talk about starting with the art of meaningful conversation and questions, I think that again is the best place to start, because if you empower young people at a young age with a foundational sense of self, who they are, what's important to them, I think that that's the most important thing. And again, you can give that to a younger person and say, here are some of the questions that you can explore for yourself. And when you can relay that directly back to social anxiety and shyness and some of those things that are much more prevalent in high school and college, then what happens is that you give people a foundation to say, before you can feel confident in these situations, like, the most important thing is truly understanding, trusting, and loving yourself. And so if we can give that to young people, I think that that's always where I would start, is not telling one to do anything, but providing them with a construct to actually perform that kind of introspection that leads to virtuous interactions, connecting with the type of people that we need to.
Yeah, it's like almost trying to get it proactive rather than reactive, because that was like we were like trying to put out fires almost, and it was hard to do at that point.
Yeah, my mom always says that the wisest teachers are the greatest question askers. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I would emphasize.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was a really welcome interruption in the day. I imagine the people in this room are a fairly self-selecting group as far as being concerned about these kinds of issues. Can you talk about times where, especially as somebody who's used to being called intense in the first meetings now, for a lot of the reasons you've discussed, how do you navigate this when you're meeting somebody who is unwilling to meet you at that level and who is uncomfortable with these kinds of questions or thinks that this is extremely unnatural?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you speaking in a business context or social?
I think it applies to both.
I think
so
it
I'd
does
be curious on both
absolutely.
sides.
So let's start with social. And this is something that I've had to come to grips with as well, is again, dealing with my own anxieties and shyness with social interaction and how I wanted to show up in the world. One thing that I've become very clear on later in life is that it is not our responsibility to make people feel comfortable. It is our responsibility to be honest to ourselves. And this is within the construct of, again, leading with kindness, is that we cannot harm people, so we need to lead with kindness. But that ultimately, it is not our responsibility to make people comfortable. It is our responsibility to be honest with ourselves. And if we're accepting some of these principles about asking questions and knowing who we are and being fully present, I think that sometimes you are going to interact with people who don't connect with you, who are not on your frequency. And I think that knowing that you've showed up in integrity in those moments as yourself allows you to not get hung up on them, allows you to move forward. And the reality is that you only have limited time on this earth. And so those people who aren't able to meet you where you're at are oftentimes not those people that you're going to connect with. I'd say that, again, in the professional context, seeking to understand people is this virtuous path where if people aren't going to meet you all the way at what's your dream, and you're meeting them at, whether it's like Penn Station, whatever it is, I think that there's a way that you can start earlier on to get there. And so again, I think that just because someone can't meet you there, like if you were to break down again, and you talked about when we were chatting right here, like your perception of people right off the bat. And I love the idea that your first question is not your real question. Is that for a lot of people, like they won't be able to go there right off the bat. So what is another question right after that you can go into? And again, just allowing yourself to lead with curiosity and what you want to know about that person. So if they're not willing to talk about their dreams or what they care about, what do you want to know about them and why they're not willing to go there? It's again, just giving yourself to that process and seeing where that takes you, I think is always going to be a virtuous path. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Just touching again on the subject of younger people, children, as a relatively new father, and speaking from my own experience on Facebook, it's been my feeling pretty early on that a lot of people I know have exchanged a few meaningful relationships with a lot of meaningless ones.
Yeah.
And a lot of really shallow ones, so really kind of replace depth with breadth, and we're not talking to each other anymore, we're broadcasting.
Yeah.
Right, and we're advertising, so to speak, and at least some of us do. And
of course.
And it's certainly the experience on Facebook, browsing Facebook. It's an inescapable experience of comparison. And since you quoted Brené Brown, I'm sure you know her works. And comparison is the pathway to feeling less, to feeling ashamed. And I feel that I myself, I'm fairly immune to it, not completely. At least I'm smart enough to avoid exposing myself to too much of that. Are there tangible things that we can do to help children develop that immunity to the inescapable world around us, where there'll be a lot of people that are shallow. There'll be a lot of people that will judge them using meaningless tools like likes or etc. And obviously, developing self-worth, developing integrity. These are principles I can easily agree with, but are there good tricks to do that?
Yeah.
I guess is my question.
Absolutely. Well, I'll expand on the comparison theme and then get right back into how we can apply this to young people and their browsing and social media habits. One of my favorite concepts with comparison is the idea that comparison is the thief of joy. And I just notice this in any given moment where I find myself comparing to a competitor, to someone else who's finding success. And in those moments where you feel jealousy or angst, whatever it might be when you're comparing, my first thought there, and what I've trained myself to do, is to realize that that comparison and that malice or whatever it might be is nothing, it has nothing to do with that person. It's purely internal, and it says something about myself. And so I think about the transformation of comparing to celebrating, which is what we want to do, is that if we cannot celebrate the successes of other people, it only says something about us and our own insecurities. So it's that shift from comparing to celebrating. And if we cannot celebrate, we can acknowledge that it's because of our own insecurities and something to be worked on, because no one is perfect. And as it relates to young people, I think, again, rather than telling them what to do, the best thing that we can do with young people is to ask them why they are doing things and to help them come to their own realizations. And again, how we do that is with good questions. And I'll revert back to one that we talked about earlier, which is if you have a young person who's posting on Instagram or is typing these types of comments, to simply ask them, like, why are you doing that? And to see what kind of answer that they actually have, to actually help them identify those motivations for themselves, to see if it's something that they like. And again, it's, we all remember our younger years, and it's like we are hardwired to rebel. And so when someone is telling us that this is the way to do something, we're going to be very resistant for anyone to tell us what to do when we're still formulating our own identity. But when we can give people a construct to do that meaningful introspection for themselves, I think that that is probably the most effective path to help them evaluate those things. So it's just understanding why they're doing those things, and hopefully encouraging designers and people at Google to be thoughtful about how we are designing products and what we're defining as success.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? One more, or a few more. Yeah, man. If you email john@tribute.co, he'll be sure to send these out. Thanks, man. Hi.
So I'm a huge fan of Dr. Brene Brown, so you had me at Brene Brown. So I wanted to just ask if you had any statistics on, because she talks a little bit about this in several of her books, but on how the expression of gratitude is what actually gives you joy. So do you have any, is your company doing any type of studies on people that actually participate in this and their levels of joy going up as a result of the expression of gratitude? I would just be interested to see that data.
Yeah, so we've partnered with a nonprofit called the Grateful Network. And so again, they're doing a lot of leading edge research along with the Greater Good Science Center, which is a unit outside of UC Berkeley. And they're doing some of the leading edge research about the practice of gratitude and what it's doing on the mind. And so we have our internal metrics that we talked about in terms of actually quantifying expressions of love within these videos, of actually quantifying this act of sharing gratitude, how that improves your connectivity with your community. And so right now, again, of these 50,000 people who've done it, right now you're looking at 99% of people who say that the act of sharing this gratitude for someone they cared about made them feel more connected to their community, and tears of joy, or now call them wonder joy. So I can provide that. But I'd say that those are probably two of the the networks that I check out with more of the kind of leading edge research. So something that we're kind of piggybacking off of them to apply that into our kind of in our design and our development.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks so much. So if you have anything nice to say it all. One of my favorite things as well is when I'm giving a talk and someone's just nodding, because yeah, she gets it. You were nodding the whole time, and it's such a great thing to see that. So thank you for that. Yeah, that was awesome. So who are you guys going to give your tribute to? Yes. There you go, wife. So that's my fiance Mickey, by the way, in the back of the room, who gave me the first tribute and inspired it all. And now she's 6 months pregnant. We just got back from the doctor today. She's got a few now, too. And obviously, I made her my wife, so it works. We actually just had a beautiful one. We had a woman who proposed to her girlfriend. How long was the video, John? Yeah, an hour long. And just some of the stories, again, it's I get goosebumps thinking about it. So this past week alone, we had this woman who had an hour-long video to propose to her girlfriend. We had another woman who just submitted a testimonial, and she was crying in her testimonial video, and she said, I gave this to my best friend of 55 years. She was diagnosed with lung cancer 5 years ago, and she didn't make it. And I did this video so that her granddaughters would know who she was. And the tribute ended up being an hour and a half. And it's giving this gift of legacy and gratitude and reminding people who someone was. So if there's anyone in your lives who's really had an impact, we'd love to see you guys on the site. Yeah. Thanks, guys.